So today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics as of lately because I have a new baby, well, a 7-month-old, but today we're going to be talking about sleep training, which I know is not for everyone. It wasn't for me for my first two until they got to about 6 months, and then I kind of really kicked it into high gear. But with this baby, I was super determined to kind of have a game plan going into it, and so I just wanted to talk a little bit about sleep training. This might interest you, this might not. You might be watching this because you're contemplating it, so here are my thoughts. So there's 1,000,001 ways to raise a child, and everyone does it their own way. But if you are interested in sleep training and considering possibly looking into this book, I wanted to give my review, my synopsis of it, and before I forget and before it gets a little too rusty, here is my review on this book, 12 Hours by 12 Weeks Old. And I have to give my sister, Leah, a shout out. She was really successful with this, and that really encouraged me to go for it and try it. And then since then, I've known several other friends that have done it, that have been successful at it. So I suggest you go get this book. It's a really quick and short read. Buy it and you will refer to it the entire time you are sleep training your baby. So suggest getting this on Amazon, worth every penny. Okay, there are 2 reasons why I like this. Number 1 is I am the type of person that really dreads the newborn stage, and with each baby it has gotten easier, but I love my sleep, and I know most moms and parents do, right? But for me, when I am not sleeping, like my whole world falls apart. And I know several friends that can just function on little sleep and the newborn stage doesn't bother them, but for me it is very overwhelming. The lack of sleep gives me like anxiety, and so as I knew I was approaching this with Florence, I really knew I had to get a game plan in place. The reason I love this book is because I read it and it made me feel like it relaxed me in knowing that, okay, by 12 weeks, I hope it works for us, put me to ease. Like, it just made me realize, okay, I have a strategy in place for my newborn. And it was just really comforting in those moments of exhaustion, knowing, okay, in a little bit I'm going to start sleep training and, we're going to get through this. Number 2 reason why I loved it is it gives you step-by-step instructions, whether you're nursing, bottle feeding, weeks. It breaks down, the chapters break down in weeks 1 through 6, 6 through 8. Like, it gives you very clear direction, and I think a lot of other sleep training books leave a lot of the guesswork up to the mom, and the reason I like this is because it just takes all the guesswork out and gives you step-by-step directions. And the last reason why I love this is that it was very little crying it out. It was a very kind of relaxed, easy approach for me, and it worked really well for us. It's worked really well for a lot of people I know. Yes, I'll get into that a little bit later. The book breaks down into several chapters. The first segment is weeks 1 through 6, and she basically just focuses on just kind of get by, survive, do what you need to do to get through those hard adjustment newborn weeks, but just don't create any bad habits. So she just talks about just making sure your baby's not always falling asleep in the swing, being held all the time. You're kind of having this long-term picture, so it's like a balance. You bring your new baby home and you kind of do what you need to do to get by, and I'm guilty of that, sleeping with them on my chest at night. But then in the back of my head, I knew, okay, I can't create any super bad habits. Do what I need to do for today. There's a lot of grace in those moments, but don't create any bad habits. So that's the first 6 weeks. Okay, so the second part of the reading focuses on weeks 6 through 8, and she actually calls it the 2-week storm. And she says in her years of baby training, she sees a lot of babies go from sleepy, sweet, peaceful infants to they kind of start to wake up and have a little bit of opinion and fussy time. And so sometimes it's 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes it's a 6 to 8 week window, but she says you'll always have that 2-week window. And so she always wants to typically start the training around week 8. So basically the first 8 weeks of life, she just says, kind of just in more words or such, just try to get by. And she really starts you focusing kind of after 6 weeks, getting your baby to eat every 4 hours. That is the key. And when I originally had thought about doing this book when Omni was a baby, I thought there's no way my baby can go every 4 hours. That just is way too long for a baby. But what I noticed with Florence, and after talking with more people that did it, I was like, okay, so when Florence was probably like 5 or 6 weeks old, I noticed that she was starting to be able to eat every 3.5 hours. So I thought maybe she can. And so her whole thing is, before you can start the night training, is to get your baby on eating 4 times a day, a 4-hour schedule. So every 4 hours. What she does is she suggests you pick kind of a schedule. So for us, the 7 to 7 o'clock window worked best. So I would wake Florence up at 7, and I started doing this before I started doing the night training around week 8 to 9. So I'd wake her up at 7, and I would try to get her to go as far as she could to the 11 o'clock window. And then 11, then she would eat again at 3, and then again at 7. And so the weeks like 5 through 8 were that's what I was really focusing on. And one thing I want to mention is that this was something that I didn't really see being such a positive bonus for me. I just kind of thought about the nighttime and I just can't wait to sleep through the night. But I didn't realize how awesome it would be to have my baby on such a tight schedule during the day. So that was a huge bonus. So around like week 6 to 7, she was pretty much being able to stretch every 4 hours. And there were times where she couldn't. She was just so hungry. But Susie talks about having a daytime toolbox and a nighttime toolbox. So the daytime toolbox is all about distraction. So like bouncing your baby, using a pacifier, putting them under a play mat. What are things that you can do to keep inching that clock forward and getting them closer to that 4 o'clock feeding window? Because she suggests not starting the night training until you can get your baby to that 4-hour window throughout the day. By the time Florence was 8 weeks old, we were kind of on that schedule. And I didn't think it was possible, but we were. And I personally didn't nurse the first couple months, but I also had to supplement. And so by the time she was 8 weeks old, though, she was pretty much strictly bottle fed. So I just do want to add that. But she does have in her book sections on bottle feeding versus breastfeeding. Wherever you find yourself on that spectrum, you can kind of refer to categories. And I know people that have been successful in this with bottle feeding their kids as well as nursing. I think it takes a little bit more work and effort when you're nursing, since you can't visibly see the amount of ounces your kid is getting. But it is possible. I've known a mom who's done this for all 4 of her babies, and she swears by this. And she was successful all 4 times. Also, just to mention, she says in that 6 to 8 week window, your baby should at least be able to go every 3 hours. So if you're not to the 4-hour mark yet, your baby should definitely be able to eat every 3 hours, at least at that point. So weeks 8 through 12 is what she calls BBC. She calls it the baby boot camp. And so Florence turned 8 weeks when we were traveling over Christmas, and so we got home a few days after, so I knew I wasn't going to start the training while we were traveling. But as soon as we got home, we started the night training. She has 3 criteria that you need to have mastered pretty much before you start the night training, and so these are the 3 things. Okay, number 1, your baby has to be at least 9 pounds. Number 2, your baby should be eating at least 24 ounces over a 24-hour period. So if your baby is still eating at night, that's okay. Those ounces she does include in that 24-hour schedule. Just know that as you're taking away ounces at night, your goal is to get your baby to be eating those ounces during the day. And then she says you can't start the training for a singleton, a single baby, twins maybe later. Until they're 4 weeks, but I don't really understand that because I can't fathom feeding or doing this training on a 4-week-old anyway. So we started Florence just after 8 weeks. She's probably 8.5 weeks old. And then this is the order that she wants you to train. So first things first, she wants you to start in the 8 to 12 week baby boot camp. She really wants you to get your baby eating every 4 hours throughout the day. So that's your first goal. We had mastered that already at that point, so we moved into this second goal, which is eliminating your night feedings. This third goal is getting your baby to sleep through the night, and then your fourth goal is focusing on daytime sleep, like naps. So when we started the training, Florence was only waking up once at night. She was doing that 2:30, 3 o'clock window. So we only had 1 night training to eliminate. In the book, when you're starting to do the night eliminations, it's just so fascinating and interesting how it works. Again, you're gonna have to read the book and get it yourself, but it's just kind of a quick overview. is that she shows you how to eliminate your night feedings. She recommends eliminating the second one, and then the first, and then the third, in that order. And so it's neat because she will give you like a full chart of how to eliminate all the feedings. So for me, we only did have one feeding to eliminate. What would happen was she was taking about 4 ounces between 2:30 and 3. So for 3 nights, when she would wake up at 2:30 or 3, that window, kind of, that was her new, we started at that time. I would feed her 4 ounces for 3 nights, and then after that 3rd night, then we would go down half an ounce. And so she talks about nursing, you do it for so many minutes. So if you're nursing for like 8 minutes, after 3 nights you go down, I think you decrease it maybe by a minute. I don't know, you'll have to, don't mark my words on that, you'll have to read the book on that section. But for us, we'd go down half an ounce. So after 3 nights of 4 ounces, then after that night, the 3rd night, we went down to 3.5. And after 3 nights of 3.5, we went down to 2.5. And after 2.5, 2, 1.5, 1. And I even got it down to half an ounce. And I kept thinking, how is this working? And she would pretty much go down after every feeding as I was slowly eliminating feedings. We got down to half an ounce. She had just turned 12 weeks. And the day, like, I had 2 more nights of half ounce before I was pulling the bottle, and I was getting all nervous, and she had 2 more nights to go, but she didn't even make it. We made it to just 1 feeding of half an ounce, and then the next night she slept through the night, and she slept through the night again and again and again. And I'm telling you guys, this worked. It's worked for us, and she slept through the night consistently by 12 weeks. It was very little cry it out. Susie also talks about, when you're doing the night training, of pushing the clock forward. So there were a few nights that she would sometimes wake up before 2:30 that I would have to go and put her pacifier in. I'd use my nighttime toolbox, which a lot of times is shushing, patting the belly, using a pacifier. You don't really want to pick them up. And so she talks about like pushing the clock forward. So if she were to ever wake up like randomly like at 2, I knew in my head like her feed time wasn't till like 2:30, and if the next night or 2 she made it to 2:45, that becomes her new feed time. Like, you keep pushing the clock forward. And there were some nights that I would have to go in, she was up like an hour before her feed time, and put the pacifier in and do that, get up and down like 10 times, or maybe not 10, like 6 times. And although that is annoying and that is frustrating, I just kept in my head, like, my mantra is baby boot camp, like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna conquer this. And slowly the clock kept pushing forward. Like, by the end, she was waking up around like 3:30, 3:45. So in our few weeks of training, she was slowly already pushing the clock forward. And again, like, if she were to wake up at 6, I would go and put a passy in, and a lot of times she'd put herself back to sleep until 6:45, 7. So for her, this worked really great. The reason I also love this is that there was really very like little crying. There were a few times I had to, she says to wait 3 to 5 minutes before you go in. So that was like the longest that she would cry. And I'd feed her, and we got down to half an ounce, and then she slept through the night. You guys, no joke. From that day forward, she did it for 2 months straight. She went past the 4-month sleep regression, and at 5 months, is when we hit a little roadblock. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Book did work, and I'm very thankful my daughter takes a pacifier, because I feel like that was like a very good nighttime toolbox. It really helped soothe her. She was also swaddled, and so by 12 weeks I moved her to the magic sleep suit, Baby Merlin's magic sleep suit sack, which was great. By about the 5 months, she got her first kind of really bad cold, and so she started waking up more. And although I never fed her, there were times that I would have to get up several times after she slept through the night for 2 months straight and go put her passy in, and the 5-month to 6-month window was kind of rough for us. So I feel like this book works, but I feel like if your daughter or son takes a pacifier, they don't really learn to self-soothe all the way, because if you're constantly going in and putting the pacifier in, they're not learning, they're not really crying it out, they're not learning how to self-soothe and put themselves back to sleep necessarily. They might, if they're not taking a pacifier. Between the 5 and 6 month window, I kind of had to do my own training and kind of refigure out what I was doing with her, and it was hard. She got sick. I mean, there's always something, right? Teething, they get sick. She was starting to learn to flip over from her stomach to her back at this point. And so all of those things combined in that 1 month just caused a lot of frustration. And she was also like just learning how to like find her pacifier and put it back in. So that's my only kind of negative thing to say about this, is I don't feel like they learn to self-soothe as much because there is very little crying. So I had to kind of implement my own training between 5 and 6. I kept thinking, well, she's sick, I felt bad for her, so I'd have to go in a lot and put her pacifier in, but I never reverted back to picking her up much or feeding her unless she was like freaking out. But I did have to kind of make her cry more, which was kind of hard because I wasn't used to that early on, which is kind of nice. I feel like if you have to make them cry when they're older, it's a little bit more doable. Like, I hate it, I totally hate it, but I think it's okay. And I just know, like, you're so much happier when you're sleeping through the night. You've done this for 2 months straight. Like, I know you're capable of it. And so probably the last like week right before she turned 6 months, I was like, there were some nights where I just had to make her cry for like, 30-40 minutes. And again, this isn't for everyone, but I knew that she was so capable of sleeping through the night that I kind of had to just let her go and figure out how to self-soothe. And now I can say she's almost 8 months. It's been 2 months of she wakes up, she flips over, she wakes up probably throughout the night, and she can find her pacifier and put it in herself, which is a game changer, right? But I had to kind of implement my own kind of cry it out strategy for just such a short time, but it was worth it because I was getting exhausted waking up 1 to 5 times a night to just go put her passy in because she couldn't find it or was flipping or whatever. And then once she realized sleeping on your tummy is kind of comfortable, now that's kind of the position she prefers. That is my synopsis. I want to encourage you that if you are in the middle of sleep training or thinking about it and you're pregnant, I highly recommend it. It is so life-changing, not only for you as the mom, but for your whole family, especially if you have more kids. Like, you need to be awake and able to function in the morning, and your babies need and want the rest. If you guys have any questions and want to know more of my strategies, some more details, like, I'd love to answer them. So leave comments below and I'll try to get back to you. Again, I highly recommend it. I think it is so good for the mom, the baby, the whole family. And go get this book. It's awesome. I hope and wish you much success, and you can do it. You can totally do this. Just follow it. That's why I like this book step by step. And there you go. Another fun vlog today on sleep training. Thanks for watching. Have a good day and happy sleeping.